The plasma bolt missed Marcus Chen's head by 3 centimeters. He didn't flinch. 5 years fighting in the Outer Rim had taught him that. Flinching got you killed. He pressed himself against the crystalline wall of the Zephyrian Palace, counting heartbeats. 3 armed rebels rounded the corner, their chitinous armor gleaming under the violet sunlight streaming through shattered windows. Marcus waited until they separated, then moved. His combat knife found the gap in the first 10's neck plating. The second turned too slowly. Marcus drove his elbow into the creature's mandibles, feeling bone crack beneath the impact. The third raised its weapon. Marcus kicked it from its grip, caught it midair, and fired a single shot through the rebel's chest cavity. The body hit marble with a wet thud. "Clear!" Marcus spoke into his comm unit, but received only static. The palace's communication systems were compromised. Of course they were. This wedding had been a target from the moment the alliance was announced. The Zephyrian queen's daughter marrying a Kolthari prince meant peace between 2 species that had warred for 3 generations. Some people preferred the war. Marcus moved through corridors lined with bioluminescent flowers that pulsed with alarm, their natural rhythm disrupted by violence. He'd been hired as discreet security, a human mercenary with a reputation for keeping dignitaries alive when everyone wanted them dead. The Zephyrians had specifically requested him after he'd extracted a diplomat from a collapsing station near Proxima Station. They paid well. He didn't ask questions. He found the first bodies in the grand hallway leading to the ceremonial chamber. 6 royal guards, their ceremonial armor torn open by close-range plasma fire. Professionals. The rebels had known exactly where to hit, exactly when the rotation would leave this section vulnerable. Marcus knelt beside the nearest guard, checked for a pulse he knew wouldn't be there, and took the creature's sidearm. 2 weapons were better than 1. The ceremonial chamber's doors hung open, one blown completely off its hinges. Marcus approached from the side, using pillars for cover. Inside, the wedding guests huddled against the far wall, a mass of different species in formal attire now streaked with dust and fear. At the center of the room stood the queen herself, Zatera, her forearms spread wide in a protective stance. Her chitinous crown had been damaged, but her spine remained rigid. Beside her stood her daughter, Kira Lin, still in her wedding garments that shifted colors with her emotional state. They pulsed dark crimson, terror. 3 rebels held the chamber, their weapons trained on the crowd. The leader, bigger than the others, with scars across his facial plating, held something in his upper manipulator appendage, a detonator. "You murdered our colonies," the rebel leader hissed in galactic common, his accent thick. "You made peace with our exterminators. The Kolthari burned our worlds." "Your daughter marries genocide." Marcus analyzed the situation in seconds. Explosives somewhere in the chamber, probably multiple locations, given the rebels' confidence. Hostages too dense to risk crossfire, the Queen's guards dead or pinned down elsewhere. The rebels were fanatics, which meant negotiation had already failed before it started. He needed an angle. "The Kolthari prince," the rebel continued, gesturing with his weapon toward a tall, golden-scaled being trying to shield several guests with his body. "Where is your coward groom? Hiding while others die?" "He's protecting the wounded," Kira said, her voice surprisingly steady. "More than you ever did for our people." The rebel struck her across the face with his lower arm. The queen moved, but froze when the rebel raised the detonator. Marcus made his choice. He stepped through the broken doorway, both weapons lowered, hands visible. "I'm the human they hired for security," he said calmly, letting his weapons clatter to the floor. "You've made your point. Take me instead. Let them go." The rebel leader's compound eyes fixed on Marcus. The mercenary. "We were told about you. Human. No loyalty except to credits." "That's right," Marcus agreed, walking forward slowly. "Which means I'm valuable. You can broadcast my execution. Show the whole sector what happens when humans interfere in Zephyrian politics. Better propaganda than killing wedding guests." The rebel considered this. Marcus counted his steps. 4 meters. 3.5. "Do you think we're stupid?" the rebel asked. "I think you're desperate," Marcus replied. "Smart enough to infiltrate palace security. Desperate enough to wire explosives in a room full of witnesses. If you just wanted them dead, you'd have already triggered that detonator." 3 meters. "We want justice." "Then take me. I've killed more of your people than anyone in this room." "Rimward Station, 3 years ago, I was there." The rebel's posture shifted. Recognition.
Anger. 2.5 meters.
The rebel raised his weapon toward Marcus just as a small figure broke from the crowd. A child, no more than 5 in human years, one of the Zephyrian noble offspring. She ran toward her mother, crying, confused by the violence. Everything happened in the space between heartbeats. The rebel's weapon tracked toward the child. Marcus lunged, his hand catching the barrel just as plasma discharged, the bolt scorching past the child's head and into the ceiling. Marcus twisted, using the rebel's own momentum to drive him backward. The detonator flew from the rebel's grip. Marcus caught it. The chamber froze. "Lower your weapons," Marcus said quietly, holding the detonator where everyone could see it. "Or I finish what you started." The 2 remaining rebels hesitated. The Queen moved with sudden fluid grace, her guards pouring through side entrances Marcus hadn't even seen. The rebels were disarmed and restrained in seconds. Marcus carefully set the detonator on the floor and stepped back, hands raised. The Queen approached him, her movements deliberate. She looked at the child, now sobbing in her mother's arms. She looked at Marcus. She looked at her daughter, and then at the Kolthari prince who had rushed to Kierlin's side. "You put yourself between death and my blood," the Queen said. Her voice carried through the chamber, formal and absolute. "You caught a detonator meant to murder my daughter's future. You moved for a child not your own." He'd done what needed doing. The job wasn't over until the clients were safe. The Queen's upper arms spread wide in a gesture Marcus recognized from his briefing materials. Formal acknowledgement. Her lower arms touched her chest, then extended toward him. "I name you defender of the royal house," she declared. "I name you guardian of my bloodline. I name you family." That hadn't been in the contract. Kierlin stepped forward, her wedding garments still shifting with emotion, but now shot through with silver, gratitude, and wonder. She looked at Marcus, then at her mother, then back at Marcus. "Mother?" she said softly.
"Do you mean?" "I mean what I speak," the Queen said. "He has proven himself."
No contract, no payment could compel what he did. Only honor. Only family. She turned back to Marcus, her compound eyes reflecting the chamber's light in fractured rainbows. "You are my son now, my daughter's brother. Our blood." Marcus Chen, mercenary, fighter, survivor of 100 battles across a dozen systems, found himself completely unprepared for the Queen of the Zephyrian Empire to call him family. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the assembled witnesses, at the prince, at Kierlin, who was now smiling despite the tears streaming down her face. "Your Majesty," he finally managed. I was just doing my job." "You saved my granddaughter," the Queen said, gesturing to the child now being checked by medical staff. "Jobs do not inspire such sacrifice. You moved without thought for your own survival. That is love. That is family." The chamber erupted in a chorus of approval, multiple species making their own sounds of agreement. The Kolthari prince approached Marcus and placed a clawed hand on his shoulder. "Brother," the prince said in accented common, "I owe you the life of my bride." Marcus felt reality tilting beneath him. He'd walked into a palace as hired security. He was apparently walking out as royalty. "Can I at least finish the job first?" he asked. The Queen's mandibles spread in what her species used for smiling. "The wedding will proceed. You will stand with the royal family. And when this is done, we will speak of your new responsibilities, my son." Yet as the sound like chimes in wind. "Welcome to the family, Marcus. I promise we're usually less dramatic." Marcus looked at the blown open doors, the scorch marks, the detained rebels, the traumatized guests. "Somehow," he said, "I doubt that." The Queen's guard secured the chamber while technicians carefully dismantled the explosives. Marcus stood where he was told, still processing what had happened. He'd been adopted by alien royalty. That was a new one, even for him. Within the hour, the wedding proceeded, conducted in a chamber hastily cleared of debris. Marcus stood beside the Queen, acutely aware of every eye on him, every whisper. The human mercenary, the Queen's new son. The one who caught the detonator, he'd faced down warlords and survived vacuum exposure. He'd fought in battles where defeat meant extinction. But standing in formal witness to an alien wedding as a member of the royal family? That terrified him more than any weapon. The ceremony concluded with traditional exchanges Marcus didn't fully understand, but the emotion was universal. Love, hope, the possibility of peace. He watched Kierlin and her prince pledge themselves to each other, watched the Queen maintain perfect composure despite the recent violence, watched the guests slowly relax as security was reestablished. When it was over, the Queen turned to him. "Walk with me, my son. We have much to discuss." Marcus followed her through corridors now heavily guarded, into a private chamber where only family was permitted. The reality of what he'd been named settled over him like gravity. "You're wondering if you can refuse," the Queen said, settling onto a seat designed for her physiology. "If you can simply take payment and leave." "The thought crossed my mind," Marcus admitted. "You cannot. I have spoken it before witnesses, in the formal tongue, during the sacred ceremony. You are my son. Refusing would dishonor both of us and destabilize the alliances I've spent decades building. The other species would see weakness, division. The peace would fracture. Marcus absorbed this, so I'm trapped. There is a difference." The Queen's eyes studied him. "Tell me, Marcus Chen, why did you truly move for that child? You said you were doing your job. But your job was to protect my daughter, not every child in the chamber." Marcus thought about the question. About the child running through gunfire. About instinct that moved faster than thought. "I've seen enough children die," he said quietly. "I couldn't let another one." "That," she finally said, "is why you are my son. Not because you are skilled, though you are. Not because you are brave, though you are. Because when confronted with innocence and danger, you chose to protect it at any cost. That is the foundation of family, of royalty, of the future I am trying to build." She rose, all four arms moving in a formal pattern. "You will have quarters in the palace. You will be trained in our customs, our language, our politics. You will stand as Kirilin's brother at state functions. You will help protect what we are building here. And if I'm terrible at it," Marcus asked, "then you will learn, as all children do." The Queen moved toward the door, then paused. "You asked if you could finish the job. The job has changed, Marcus. It is no longer a contract. It is a lifetime. Welcome home, my son." She left him alone in the chamber, with the weight of a crown he'd never sought and a family he'd never expected. Marcus Chen sat down heavily, processing everything. He'd survived today. He'd saved lives, and he'd somehow become part of something larger than any battle he'd ever fought. Outside, the palace began to settle into evening, the twin suns setting over a world that had just barely avoided another war. Somewhere on the complex, Kirilin and her prince were beginning their new life together. The Queen was likely already meeting with advisors, managing the political fallout of the attack, and Marcus was now part of it all. The human son of an alien queen, brother to a princess, guardian of a royal house. He laughed once, sharp and surprised. "What the hell have I gotten myself into?" He asked the empty room. The walls, lined with bioluminescent flowers, pulsed gently in response, their light the color of welcome. He supposed he'd find out. The next morning arrived with protocol officers who looked at Marcus with expressions that might have been curiosity or concern, difficult to tell across species barriers. They'd presented him with formal robes in colors that apparently signified his new status, taught him basic etiquette that would keep him from accidentally declaring war, and informed him that the Queen expected him at the morning council. "Council?" Marcus asked, still adjusting the unfamiliar garment. "You are family now," the senior protocol officer said, her translator rendering her speech in crisp common. "You will observe until you understand our ways." Marcus wanted to argue that he was a fighter, not a politician, but he'd already learned that refusing the Queen wasn't really an option. Not if he wanted to preserve the peace she'd fought for. The council chamber was smaller than he'd expected, circular, with seats arranged in concentric rings. The Queen sat at the center, her presence commanding despite her stillness. Kirilin sat to her right, the prince beside her. An empty seat waited to the Queen's left, for him. Marcus took it, acutely aware of the other council members watching him, representatives from a dozen species, all allies or potential allies, all calculating what this human's presence meant. The Queen began speaking in formal Zephyrian. Marcus's translator struggled with the ceremonial dialect, but he caught the essentials. Reports on the attack. Security failures, political consequences. "The separatists have shown they will strike even at sacred ceremonies," one counselor said. "We cannot assume any gathering is safe." "Then we make them safe," another responded. "We increase security, restrict access. We cannot build peace in a fortress," Kirilin interrupted, her voice calm but firm. "If we retreat behind walls, we prove the separatists right. We show that different species cannot coexist. The princess speaks wisdom," the prince added. "But wisdom without security is merely beautiful sentiment. We need both." The debate continued, voices rising and falling in the complex harmonics of multi-species discourse. Marcus listened, learning the rhythms, the factions, the underlying tensions. He'd been in enough command briefings to recognize the patterns. Everyone wanted peace. No one agreed on how to achieve it. Then one of the counselors turned to Marcus. The human, the counselor said, not unkindly. You fought in the Rim Wars. You've seen conflict between species. What would you counsel? Marcus felt the weight of their attention, their expectation. He wasn't a counselor. He was a fighter who'd been adopted by a queen because he'd done what needed doing. But they were asking. So he answered. In the Rim, he said carefully, we learned that security theater doesn't work. You can have 1,000 guards, perfect procedures, impenetrable defenses. Determined people will always find a way through. The Separatists proved that yesterday. Several counselors shifted uncomfortably. So you suggest we do nothing? One asked. I suggest we accept that perfect security is impossible and plan accordingly. Multiple layers. Redundancy. Expect failure and have backup systems. But more than that, Marcus paused, choosing words carefully. The Separatists struck the wedding because it was a symbol. Princess Kiralyn and the prince together represent peace. They made that symbol a target. So we should have canceled the wedding? Kiralyn asked quietly. No. You should multiply it. Make peace so common, so widespread, so normal that it becomes impossible to target. One wedding is a symbol. 1,000 weddings, 1,000 partnerships, 1,000 daily cooperations between species. That's not a symbol. That's reality.
You can't bomb reality.
The Queen studied Marcus with what might have been approval. You would have us accelerate integration, she said. Make cooperation so fundamental that the Separatists cannot strike at it without striking at everything. Yes, Your Majesty. Make peace boring. Make it ordinary. Make it impossible to separate again. One counselor laughed, a whistling sound that Marcus's translator rendered as bitter amusement. The human suggests we defend peace by making it unremarkable. There is philosophy in that. There is practicality, the Queen corrected. My son speaks from experience. He has fought in wars we only study. His perspective has value. My son. She said it so casually, as if Marcus had been her child for years rather than hours. The other counselors accepted it without question. Apparently in Zephyrian culture, once the Queen declared something, it simply was. The council continued, plans forming and reforming. Marcus contributed where he could, mostly on security matters, occasionally on strategy. He watched Kiralyn navigate political currents with practiced grace, watched the prince quietly build consensus between factions, watched the queen guide everything with minimal words and maximum impact. This was his family now. These were his people. The thought still felt alien. After the council dispersed, Kiralyn approached him. Up close, her features were delicate, her compound eyes reflecting Marcus in a dozen facets. Thank you, she said. For yesterday. For today. For accepting this. Did I accept it? Marcus asked. Felt more like I got drafted. Mother does not ask, she declares. It is her way, but she declared you family because she meant it. She does not lie, especially not about blood. I'm not actually her blood, Marcus pointed out. In Zephyrian culture, blood is a choice. Biology is merely circumstance. You chose to protect our family when you had no obligation. That made you blood. Everything else is just formality. Marcus considered this. What if I'm bad at being royalty? Then you will be a bad royal who saved my daughter's life and caught a detonator meant for my wedding. The historical records will be confused, but grateful. Kiralyn's expression shifted, becoming more serious. Marcus, you understand what Mother did, yes? By naming you son, by giving you family status, she bound you into the alliance. You're human. Your presence in the royal family is a message to every human colony, every human government. We trust you enough to make you one of us. Political theater, Marcus said. Political reality. If humans see one of their own accepted into a Zephyrian royal house, it changes the relationship between our species. You're a bridge now. Mother built it in a moment, with words, because that's what she does. She sees opportunities and takes them before anyone realizes they existed. Marcus absorbed this. He'd been outmaneuvered by a queen who saw him as both son and strategic asset. He should be angry. Instead, he felt something else. Respect.
She's terrifying, he said. Yes, Kiralyn agreed cheerfully.
But she's our terror. Welcome to the family, brother. Brother. The word settled into Marcus's consciousness. Foreign, but not unwelcome. He'd had siblings once, before the wars, before the scattered diaspora of humanity across the stars. He'd forgotten what family felt like. Show me around? He asked. I should probably know where I live. Follow me, brother. Let me show you your new home. The palace was vast, a complex of structures that blended Zafarian organic architecture with imported materials from a dozen allied worlds. Kirillin led Marcus through corridors that pulsed with bioluminescent life, past chambers filled with artifacts from centuries of history, through gardens where plants from different worlds grew in carefully maintained ecosystems. "This is the historical wing," she explained, gesturing to a series of chambers lined with crystalline displays. "Every major event in our species' development preserved. Mother insists all family members study here. She believes we cannot build the future without understanding the past." Marcus looked at displays showing Zafarian evolution, early civilizations, first contact with other species, wars and alliances and betrayals. His translator worked overtime rendering ancient text into common. "Here," Kirillin stopped before a new display, still being constructed. "This will be yesterday."
The wedding.
"You." Marcus saw images already preserved in crystal, moments frozen in light. The rebel leader, the child running, his own face caught in the instant he lunged for the detonator. "I don't need to be in history," he said uncomfortably.
You don't get to choose your family now.
"Family is history, whether we want it or not." They moved on, Kirillin pointing out quarters for various relatives, explaining relationships Marcus would need to memorize, introducing him to staff who bowed with varying degrees of curiosity. By the time they reached his own chambers, Marcus's head was spinning with names and protocols and expectations. The quarters were generous, a suite of rooms with adjustable furniture to accommodate different species. Someone had already moved in his few possessions from the security barracks where he'd been staying. His weapons sat on a table, cleaned and maintained. "The Queen insists family members remain armed," Kirillin noted, seeing his gaze. "She believes soft nobility is weak nobility. You'll be expected to maintain combat proficiency." "Good. You'll start training with the Royal Guard tomorrow."
They'll want to test you.
"Test me? Your family? But you're also the new security consultant." "They need to know if you're competent or just lucky." Marcus smiled. "Tell them to bring their best." Kirillin laughed. "I like you, brother. You're going to cause Mother all sorts of interesting problems." She left him to settle in, promising dinner with the family that evening. Marcus stood in his new quarters looking out over the palace grounds toward the city beyond. Somewhere out there, the separatists were regrouping, planning their next move. Peace was fragile, held together by alliances and marriages, and the hope that different species could learn to coexist. He was part of that now, part of the family holding it all together. His communicator chimed, a message from his former handler, asking about the job, about payment, about when he'd be available for the next contract. Marcus looked at the message for a long moment, then began typing his response. "Contract complete. Situation changed. I'm staying."
Don't contact this number again.
He sent it before he could reconsider. The human mercenary was gone. The Queen's son remained. That evening, Marcus attended his first family dinner. The Queen presided over a table that accommodated multiple species' dietary needs, with Kirillin and her prince, various cousins and uncles, and political allies who'd been granted family status. They welcomed Marcus with varying degrees of warmth, asked questions about human culture, shared stories about palace life. The Queen watched it all with quiet satisfaction, occasionally directing conversation, but mostly letting it flow naturally. When the meal concluded, she gestured for Marcus to remain while others departed. "You sent a message," she said, "ending your previous employment." Marcus shouldn't be surprised, she knew. "Yes, Your Majesty. Truly, I accept that I don't really have a choice. And I accept that maybe that's not a bad thing." The Queen's mandibles moved in her version of a smile. "Wisdom, you will make mistakes, my son. You will struggle with protocol, offend visiting dignitaries, misunderstand our customs. This is expected. What matters is that you try." "I'll try," Marcus promised. "Good, because tomorrow the real work begins." The attack yesterday was merely the opening move. The separatists will not stop because one plan failed. We must build something strong enough to withstand them, strong enough to last generations. How do we do that? We survive, we adapt. We protect what we're building while building it stronger. You will help with this. Not because you are skilled, though you are. Not because you are family, though you are. But because you understand something many of my advisors do not. What's that? It is the commitment to something worth the violence required to protect it. You moved for a child yesterday without hesitation. That is what we're protecting, Marcus. The children. The future. The possibility that they might grow up in a galaxy where species cooperate instead of consuming each other. The weight of it settled over Marcus like armor. Heavy, but protective. Purpose. I understand, Mother, he said, the title feeling strange and right simultaneously. The Queen rose, her forearms moving in a gesture of blessing. Rest tonight, my son. Tomorrow you begin training with the Guard, sitting in on security briefings, learning what it means to be royal. The attack yesterday showed our weaknesses. We will strengthen them. Together. She left Marcus alone with his thoughts and the weight of a future he'd never planned but now couldn't abandon. Outside his windows, the city glowed with lights from a dozen species, all trying to build something new together. Marcus Chen, mercenary turned prince, stood watch over it all and made a silent promise to the child who'd run through gunfire, to the queen who'd called him son, to the sister who'd welcomed him as brother. He would protect this, whatever it took, however long it required. He was family now, and family didn't quit.